So hi everybody, I think that we all know each other. So I'm Amel, I'm the CEO and founder of Forelight. Forelight is a startup that is incubated here in Skydec. So we're building a solution that helps researchers analyze their qualitative data. So basically they input interviews, focus groups, surveys as well, and you get to the report faster. We work with a lot of research agencies, but we do have some in-house researchers as well using us for their qualitative data, and especially like the cross-project data. I'm super excited to have all of you. I will try to not say ladies and to all of you folks. So Ajantha worked several years in the industry. She worked for Meta, Visa, and a couple of others. She brings a lot of experience here to this fireside chat with this very important topic. Deja worked for several industries as well, for coffee, I remember, like for Nespresso, now in beauty, always in the customer experience and the research. And Katrina, who doesn't know Katrina? So she worked as well in several, in so many things. She's involved in so many initiatives as well in the Insights Association, so many things. I will let you talk about your background. So today, the main topic is, it's depending on the situation that you are in. If you are hired in the Insights, how can we avoid all this layoff? So we're going direct to the topic, okay? All of this layoff that we've been seeing in the industry in the last decade, especially. And if you've been laid off, because it can happen, how can we do better the next time? So all the topic today is about this. We'll go through the experiences, but please keep in mind that this is a chat. So we want also to hear from you and from your experiences. And we're happy we're only 10, so we can really have this chat. But first, I would love to hear from you, from your background first. Can you tell us a bit more about you, Ajantha?
Great, thanks for putting me on the spot. My name is Ajantha Suriyanarayanan, probably one of the only few you'll find on LinkedIn, so I would love to connect. I identify as a behavioral researcher, so my work is towards why people do what they do from a psychology, sociology, and business point of view, like a Venn diagram. I've worked, as Amel said, in consulting, ex-Deloitte, Visa, Meta, a lot of big brands, smaller brands. Right now, I'm working on my startup idea, and that's where things stand.
Nice. Yeah, amazing. My name is Deja. So I work in a lot of startups, specifically within the skincare industry. My role basically is just understanding the customer as it relates to just the beauty consumer, purchasing behavior, shopping behaviors, competitors, and making sure that we kind of build a target audience so we can speak directly to who's buying the product. So that's my role. I've been in skincare for like 6 years now. We'll definitely pivot to a different industry at some point, but it's really good. That's what I do.
Katrina Noelle. I run a couple of agencies in the space and work across industries in that capacity. And actually, in all of those industries that were just mentioned, right? It's a small world in that way. And as Amel said, I'm really actively involved in a lot of organizations in consumer insights and market research in general to try to push us all forward as an organization, as an industry, as a group of professionals, to make sure to stay relevant and make sure that we're iterating and growing tools and the things that we need to stay agile and adept. So I think that's sort of my capacity on the panel today is pusher of staying on pace.
Yeah, that's amazing. We want to know you better also here in the audience. Some of you work in the insight industry, some of you were customers of the insights, right? Here, all of us need insights to run our business or to be, hey, I can see you. So all of us are somehow customers of insights or providers of insights. From your perspective, from your experience, how many of you consider, or as researchers, have been considered as a strategic partner versus more, a support function where you see the insight as something that is provided at a certain point of time when you need it? Just raise your hands. Like, who see more the strategic partner? That's great. That's a good amount. That's 20% for this sample. We are researchers. We are.
At this point in time, though, that has evolved. So if you asked me, 7 years ago, I'd be like, no, I'm just an order taker.
Yeah, right. Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. And from your perspective, like, what makes the difference between those organizations, like those 20%, and the organizations where it's different? So where insights is seen as a support function. From your perspective, especially you, Katrina, you worked multiple industries for so many clients. What are the key aspects that make a client so different from the other?
I think, there's so many factors that play into that, but I think a lot about it is about internal organization and where functions sit within the organization and who's invited to which meetings and who's asked to present at which meet. There's so much just from I think it's very different when we work with companies that have the insights function centralized versus distributed amongst brand teams, like across the organization. I feel like that tends to lean towards the doer. Right. Whereas if it's a centralized function and it has a seat in those centralized rooms, there's a little bit more acceptance of the role of strategy, the role of the importance of the customer voice having a seat at that table. That's one element that I notice, and it has a lot to do with personal passion as well. I mean, if there is an insights director or leader, VP, who is really passionate about the customer and is a great storyteller, part of what we're talking about today, then there's a little bit of pushing that can be done internally just by the steam and passion of that. I don't know.
It's interesting to hear you say that if the insights leader has it, so it looks like more of a sponsorship, kind of a top-down cultural kind of push to the rest of the organization, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like, that's kind of how I got pushed into consumer insights. Was I was strictly focused on like analytics, and my job wasn't about analytics; it was just about customer experience. And I'm like, well, we have to pull something from this. So I focused heavily on analytics, and they were like, well, now that you're pulling all these insights, let's take this to another level, because we're seeing the difference within the company and also just different department strategies. So I definitely agree with that, because that's how I shifted my role.
And sometimes there's just different organizations that are passionate about the customer. Like if their company values are around designing based on the customer, that can help too.
Yeah.
That's a really good point, because I think, like my career, some of us were talking before we started, my career has gone, across the spectrum of research, where like market insights, marketing research, brand positioning research, and then across the aisle to like the product research space. Regardless of where you are, I think the market difference between research being a support function and research being a strategic thought partner relies upon whether we as researchers are doing research or solving problems. And I think that's where the depth of engagement comes in, where we're not like, what is your research question? Like, should I do a survey? Should I do a diary study? Should I do, like, not that, but more, oh, you're thinking about breaking into this new market. We're thinking about revenue expansion from a new product line. Let's think about it in X, Y, and Z manner. Like when we as researchers engage in order to solve a problem, not just do research gets elevated to a strategic thought partner position.
And sometimes that takes it takes effort to have that conversation be the starting point, right? Yes. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I've said, can I take 5 steps back? Like, where did this come from? What's going on? Like, what are we solving? What problem are we solving? Because I think a lot of the RFPs, a lot of the asks are we've got to know this thing in this little box, right? And it just takes, you have to start questioning, right? You have to start being a researcher.
Like pulling people back.
Like researching the research.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, like something you said about the RFP, like really struck a chord, because that to me is like nails on a chalkboard. It's like where people come and say, can you validate this? We're launching in 2 weeks. Can you go back? And I'm not validating anything. That's not what research is about. It's more about exploring, understanding, and being like a headlights organization, right? Like that's the role of the establishment of the organization. And if we say, okay, I'm going to check if everything works, and we're doing QA, not research. So I think pushing back on that, in one instance, I pushed back on a VP or SVP of product, and I was like, no, I'm not validating, too bad. And he turns to our design partner and goes, we're screwed. If that team is not validating that our product is working, we're screwed. I'm like, yeah, you are. Because this should have been, I mean, very politely, you guys. The conversation then moved on to, was this discussed during the planning stage? When we set our OKRs, our KPIs, whatever you do, had we discussed that this is going to be a part of the launch process? If it's not, why not? Let's correct it next time. But this time, here is how we're going to do a shortcut version. And then kind of as an almost unwanted guest, maybe, I invited myself to their, I did a kind of roadshow with their internal team meetings with all the other product leaders and talked about what can research do? Here is how we can partner. Here is a whole life cycle of partnership. And we're talking about this one teeny tiny thing. Let's fix that. Yep. And then a while later, he and his team invited us for a meeting, and they were like, here's the product concept we're thinking about, here's what we're considering doing, blah, blah, blah. I was like, sounds awesome. How can we help? What do you want us to do? And they go, I don't know, you tell us. How should we partner with research? You tell us. And I'm like, that's a great starting point. Yeah. That's how you get started. Yeah. And then from there on, you change the tone. The culture of the conversation changes.
The next time they're like, oh, she's not in the meeting. Where's she? Hold on.
Right. And that's where real innovation comes from too. Like doing the research prior to the planning.
Right.
That's, you have to leverage over it. So then when you're coming back to it and you're trying to validate an idea, it's like, well, now we're stuck in a problem that could have been avoided in the beginning.
And I think it's because the part of the topic of tonight, right, is how to have impact and make sure we're having impact. And when you're coming from behind, it's very hard to have that impact, right? So, and I think it's tricky because then it looks like you're not keeping up and you're not agile and you're not ahead of the time. Your methods are, these traditional methods take forever and cost too much. It's because we're running from behind, and you're doing this thing next week, and you just felt like talking about it now,
right?
So I think that's tricky. It's almost like part of the problem is if you don't get in soon enough up front to have the kind of conversations that you're suggesting, then the image isn't great as a result.
It's our brand as a research organization. It's our brand that gets impacted, and once it's set in a certain way in people's minds, it's very hard to switch it around to say, no, we're not order takers. Somebody use the term. And to have that conversation up front becomes difficult.
Yeah, that's super interesting. There's part of it, which is the organization. I think that everything that we're talking about points out to the culture of research, and second, how the organization can enable this research. Because if there's not this organization where the insights people are sitting high enough, basically, you cannot infuse this because you will not be aware of what is happening in the highest level, and it will just arrive to you once the product is pre-launch, or the campaign is pre-launch. Yeah,
exactly.
That's really interesting. Can you maybe talk, without naming any company, of course, like walk us through a case that you had in both situations, like one where it just falls on you 2 weeks before the launch and go and validate things for me, and second, when you were in the discussion in the beginning.
Well, I have an example of it. It happened after the product launch, like years after. But so a company that I worked for, they were trying to understand why we weren't like seeing repeat purchases for a specific product. And we were going through data, we were going through surveys, trying to ask people, trying to make things make sense, and we weren't really understanding it. And it took maybe like 4 years post-launch for them to understand that the product size was well above like 50 plus competitors. And so people were taking longer to finish that product versus it not being finished early enough, hence, repurchasing it more often. So we didn't really understand that. And it took probably like a couple of months of research to really dive deep and understand like what was going on. So the outcome of that was just we switched the sizing, but that wasn't in that pre-planning, and that was something that was after launch, and it impacted sales, it impacted, lifetime revenue. So that would be an example I would give, because it took months to fix, but it wasn't like thought about when the process of that product was coming to life. So,
And with this story, with this specific story, did it change something in the organization? Like, did it change the rules somehow now from the executives, from the stakeholders to plan and not forward? Because this is like, if you quantify it, this is a lot of, maybe some sales margin that we couldn't achieve, and like there's a real loss in the business.
It's like it took 3 people to sit down and have a conversation about it, and just based on that little, like it was a little conversation, but it's going to make a huge impact on the business. And I think that's what they saw was like, okay, all we have to do is that, and now we can see a like huge profit from this. I think it did shift like that narrative with the company on like customer insights and understanding that we have to do research. It's very imperative. Yeah.
So that's sorry, Deja, I had a question, just a quick follow-up on that. Would it have helped the team to do a competitive analysis, just look at the products they were competing against, look at the size, speeds, whatever you call it, to understand what is the market norm, or was that already done and they decided to go with a larger size for some reason?
I think that was already done because generally speaking, like
that's the basis.
That's the basis. Like every brand does a competitive, like, not to say this, but if you look at like 5 products, same serums, it's pretty much all the same product, but they would have done it. It's pretty much, but like, it's no trade secret. Just go on a PDP, and look at the sizing.
I'm just trying to get to like when they did a larger size bottle of serum or whatever it was.
And there's a variant.
Was there a process? Was there a thought put in? Like, did they see it as a competitive advantage? Were they pricing the larger bottle same as the smaller sizes?
Yeah.
What was their logic behind going larger than what the industry norm was, right? There should have been something there.
Something there. And they actually, there's a variant because it's a hero product. So there's a variant of that product in like a mini sample size, which we didn't even see sales for that skyrocket more than the actual full size. And it was cheaper. So people are willing to buy the bigger product, but they're just not repurchasing it because how big it is and how long it takes.
The same product and the smaller
Yeah.
It's a great story.
But that raises another interesting point, right? As researchers, we're also committed to the data we bring to the table, and we have a continual kind of a cyclical conversation around the data. But your story kind of reverberates a lot on how important the context is.
Right.
Because it wasn't that people didn't like the product or the competitors were doing something amazing or the packaging was poor. It was just not done yet.
Basically, it was still in development.
Yeah, exactly. Which is interesting because another place where I worked in a FinServ environment, we had a similar thing where our team was looking at the impact of marketing dollars we were spending and on which consumer segments it was working. So we ran some sophisticated econometric mix models and came back with here's the marketing mix and here's what's working, here's not working. And we found that in one country in particular, the performance was, the numbers were outperforming every other country in the world. And we were like, oh, we did something amazing there. We should copy paste whatever ad copies we've written. We should do this. The same promos, we don't try them again. Like, we kind of set our agencies in motion. And then someone had the sense to say, no, put the brakes on for a second. Let's figure out why this massive explosion in revenue is coming from this one market alone. And then when we looked into the data, it looked like the revenue was coming not just from what we were doing. We did a great job, great work. But at the same time, this is a fintech product. And the government in that country, in order to cut down on black money movement, had scaled back the number of cash transactions they were permitting for certain categories. And they had imposed that you have to put your purchases on a digital payment platform. And because of that, consumers were automatically forced to put it on the payment platform, not because of what we did, but because it was a government mandate. Thank goodness someone had the sense to put the brakes on that, because otherwise we would have, multiplied the ad copies we were doing using the same media we were using without knowing the context. So context really matters behind those numbers and behind those stories.
But isn't that interesting what you said about we like the data, right? And we're very protective of the data. So I actually, you said that the example of 2 stories, it is, I have both stories about the same company. The brand shall remain nameless. For this. But there were the 2 instances I think point to what we're in charge of, right? So when we started working with the brand, they have their e-commerce. And so they had this great data analytics team, and they could tell everything that was happening in the consumers' carts and where people were lapsing, and all. It was great amount of data, and they could find the holes and the gaps and say what's happening there, and commission very bespoke research to answer those whys, right? And we worked really closely with the data analytics team, with the web team, to be able to identify those gaps in knowledge and then fill them with primary research. So they were all over it, very proactive, because it was their data. Same company, fairly recently, did a launch of in-store. And we found out about it 10 days before that happened, saying, could we get some insights on launching in this huge investment, huge brand investment in physical space? And I said, great, well, what's the budget? What's the timeline? And it's like, well, we open on the 10th. It's like, wow, okay, so do you want research once you're in store? Like, I'm assuming, right? I'm assuming we're gonna do some like in-store intersection. No, we need some before. And I was like, what are you gonna do with it in 10 days? What's the budget? We don't actually have any budget. So if you could be scrappy. And because I would argue, just based on this conversation, I hadn't actually thought about it this way before. That's not their purview. They may not have been the meeting. They didn't maybe know to ask for the budget, felt, empowered to ask, to see that coming and anticipate it and suggest some research to be done to make sure that it could come into the process when it would be helpful. And that's the same organization, that's the same set of researchers who are really smart, great people that are good at their job, very intelligent and very strategic in their thinking. But I now want to go back and ask, like, what happened? What was the difference? Right. Because those are 2 very different outcomes with exactly the same people with the same skill sets and knowledge and
same organization.
Same organization.
A channel strategy is not something you put research into 10 days before launch in a physical store.
Ideally,
Do you think perhaps in the first scenario, the research org was in with all the other stakeholders in this strategy discussions, in the planning meetings, and then the second one, they themselves were not given enough of a heads up?
That's my suspicion. I don't know. There's no throwing under buses, but that's my suspicion, is that they weren't in the rooms and they weren't involved, and so no one had the red flag check of, wait, hang on, have we asked anybody about this? Do we know how they're going to feel about it? And even if you didn't do any pre-research, at least earmark some budget for some post-launch, the studies.
It's more about planning the research. And you're talking about, it's one of my questions regarding the overlines sometimes on data, you've been talking about, some analytics and some data that do not instruct you about the why. So we do have some primary research. How did you see the balance happening, in the past years? And what's the role also of technology? I am a technology person.
Do you mean the facts? My poor light terminology.
The facts. So the over-reliance on the data and the facts, by the way, both in quantitative and in qualitative, like how harmful it was, and maybe sometimes it was also helping somehow. Like what was the right balance, or sometimes when the balance was not there, where you saw like some impact on the impact of research?
I can start with that one. It's a super interesting question, because when you talk about the role of technology, immediately what came to mind is, the play of AI, and a lot of people in my network, like researchers, have come and said, am I going to lose my job because of AI? Like, am I going to become irrelevant? No, it's a co-pilot. If you haven't, take a look at the Forelight platform. It's super cool. I was floored. But at the same time, if we kind of hark back to maybe a decade and a half ago, when companies started investing in doing research, we were spending millions on research alone. And we had studies that were literally called the $1 million study. We didn't call it the brand tracker. We didn't call it the insights, whatever. It was called the $1 million study because it cost so much. But I think what sometimes left kind of unexplored is that we don't need to go seeking new data through primary research. Consumers are putting tons of data out there, like tons. If you just scroll, I don't know the status of X right now, but when it was Twitter, or Facebook, when it was in kind of a when it was Facebook. I work for Meta, so that's all I can say. Or open Insta pages. People talking about their brand experiences, their product experiences was so prolific and so forthcoming that just mining it was giving a ton of information. I've done our teams have done multiple segmentation models, statistically significant segmentation models based on just social data, without ever speaking to a single human. We're not anti-human, we're just pro-technology, where if the data is there, let's use it. So I think from that perspective, we have this treasure trove today of taking everything that people have said through customer contacts, through feedback loops, just posting openly on the social platforms that they choose to use. And we are able to do so much with it. And when we have an intelligent analytical platform, we're able to easily dissect the sentiment of the comments. Am I happy about it? Am I sad about it? And as our kind of technology becomes more and more sophisticated, the emotions get separated out into more kind of flavors of emotions. So there is the platform to do it, there is a technology to do it. I just think we as researchers need to do a better job of harnessing what is already out there.
And presenting the treasure trove. So I think my initial thought on that is, do you see how we get so excited?
Yeah,
oh my God,
yeah,
take it. Right? Now, walking into a C-suite, it's going, oh my God, there's all this data. That's not doing us any good.
Yes.
Right? So I do think there's part of the presenting of the data. It's not the data that is the problem. It is, are you storytelling the data? Are you bringing up the key facts, like a handful of them, that are the impactful kind of cliffhanger, so what's, right? Like there is the presenting of it encased in a way that the audience is going to be receptive to it. So if we're talking about having internal impact, you can have all the data you want, but if you are not presenting it in a compelling and appropriate way to the audience within the organization, it's still going to be a struggle.
It just remains data.
That storytelling part, I think we could have like a 3-hour session about that alone. It's such a pet peeve.
But it's connected. It's connected issue, right? Yeah. Of people, keeping jobs, being relevant, providing value. It's very connected.
100%. I mean, the thing about storytelling data, this is one metric that I've used with my teams a lot. Your success comes not as a researcher, not just from our people ingesting, 30% of the audience likes it, 10% dislikes it, whatever it is. But it's more from people in other teams, non-researchers, regurgitating your story. And I use regurgitating in a very positive way here. If they are able to take the story you told them and tell others that story, that's when research has reached its peak. Because you know that not only have they processed the information that you've given them, but they have also ingested it enough for them to tell it as a story to others, to push those others to take action on this. That's a successful research.
I think I'm still trying to get the hang of that.
All of us are.
We all are, though, because we come at it from being researchers. And we think it's all really fascinating.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like we're enthused about it, and it's hard to remember that this is one thing in everybody else's world.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. At the same time, what can we do to make it easily digestible for people? For example, in one environment, we built personae for a given brand. they were pretty cool personae where we did life-size cutouts of cardboard cutouts of these personae and sat them down in various conference rooms. So each conference room had a different persona.
Oh, wow.
And over time, it was creepy to begin with. You'll have to admit that, like, you walk into a room and there is this like smiling person sitting there. But like people, other stakeholders started scheduling meetings about a given segment or about a given product that's going to impact various segments in those specific conference rooms where these cutouts were. And over a period of time, they got into the habit of turning to that persona cutout and saying, I don't think Tamara would like that. Tamara was the name of the persona. And, those of us who developed it, we were like, yes, secretively, we were like, celebrating under the chairs, doing high fives, low fives. Because a cardboard cutout made you talk about her that, a big stack of spreadsheets could not make you do.
Yeah.
And I think that was powerful. When it comes to storytelling, having emotional plays kind of really works very well. Starting with, imagine Sam walks into a room and she's feeling XYZ, and then you go on into weaving the data into a story. But what I found is, I know we're all in a Zoom kind of world where meetings are happening there. But when those in-person workshops do happen, some of us have taken to like putting small little factoids about what we've learned on tiny cards and putting like a binder clip kind of a thing around it. So people have a tangible, touchy-feely thing that they can work with. That tangibility is important. I'm not advocating for printing out the whole deck. You can please take it from a mother of two, a preschooler and an elementary schooler. We get a ton of paper home, and I'm like, could you just digitize that for me? Like, put it on some deck somewhere and send it home. I'm sure our stakeholders feel the same way about having too many tangible tchotchkes lying around. But instead, if it's a strategic thing for something that is really impactful, we're able to either create a site with interactive tiles or some kind of tangible object. Makes it easier to digest theoretical concepts that we may be positing to our people.
Their source of truth, basically.
Yeah. I heard a lot of initiatives about the voice of customer and how you can personify this. And in one of the conferences I've been to, I think it was the IEX, one company created a booth, like a phone booth, where you can call one of the personas and have a conversation with them. With AI, obviously.
Wow.
AI. It was very powerful, and a lot of stakeholders spent a lot of time in this phone booth. So they were getting lunch there and talking with customers. Like, it's my time to talk with customers. If you had the same story in a deck, maybe they wouldn't listen to it.
Right.
Yeah. So it's also like the manner of how we tell the story, not only the story itself.
Exactly.
Yeah, super interesting.
Fascinating.
Yeah. And I think it's also about understanding the organization you're in and what they would respond to.
Right.
Will they sit in the conference room and talk to her? Do they prefer something tangible? Do they, like, what is, there were a couple conversations at Tia Marie last year that were really talking about how to get insights professionals at the table. And it was a lot of conversation about that. Don't just go in thinking you have the best way of presenting this information. Like, read your audience and figure out what they need, and it can be different amongst teams. So the idea of a insights roadshow sounds great, but maybe you have to do different things for different teams within the organization on that roadshow, because they may not all, they don't need or want the same message in all those areas. So I think that's important too, not only knowing your organization, but knowing the factions within it. And if you have a chance to tell that story broadly, are you catering it? Yes.
That's a great point.
Yeah, we had a client recently who it was a stores team, and so no PowerPoints, right? No printouts, no PowerPoints. They didn't have desks, so we created a podcast report, right? That everybody got an MP3 and they could listen to it and on their own devices, and that was it was a dissemination of information option that the audience, right? It's just important, I think, to keep in mind.
Absolutely.
That's great. I think it's time to open the floor for questions.
The huge floor.
Don't make fun of it. Yeah, the huge floor.
Yes,
The way we have like a big circle here. So yeah, do you have some questions to the audience, but also like share some experiences on the topics that we just shared or anything else, how we can make the insights more impactful. This is the top line.
I have a comment, and it kind of goes into your broader topic, which you've talked about, things like storytelling and the ability to have a seat at the table, and all those things are important. One of the things that I've seen, because I'm part of the OG for the Insights Career Network, and so I've seen all these people being laid off, very smart researchers, and with a lot of experience. And one of the things, and I was part of a layoff because I was too experienced. And, you know, so I think the whole idea about there's expertise, there's a skill set, and there's capabilities, and then there's experience. And I think companies need to understand what the value is of experience, and it's about being that strategic partner. But if they don't see research as being a strategic partner, it's easier to say, I just need someone with that skill set who can just give me a deck of data, you know, and not be able to have those conversations at the right time with the right people and engage. So I don't know if you know, because I see that coming up, you know, every other week when I'm in these Insights Career Network conversations, and it's like, you know, but it starts at the top, you know, and I was hired, you know, to start a consumer insights group with the company I'm in now, and they didn't care. They wanted the experience. They're like, you're going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting. You're going to be a team of one for a while, and you know, but they valued the experience and the expertise, but they value the experience. And I'm not sure if there are a lot of companies that they're looking at their spreadsheets of costs and they're saying, but I can get two people for less money than this one person. It's like, you get what you pay for. And if they don't understand that, and that's, I think that's a lot of what's going on in the industry. People who still a lot to give, and they're not being recognized for that value.
Yeah, I think they're not seeing like the ROI from it as well. I think it depends on the industry that you're in. I know in skincare, like I would be surprised if there was actually like a data analytics team at a skincare company, like even bigger brands like a Fenty or Rare Beauty. Like I'm sure they have people on data, but I would be surprised to see if that data was really getting pushed. Because the field that you're in, like you do need data, but I think at the same time, they use a lot of competitive market research that is just flat out what it's going to be. So I think they're probably not seeing like the ROI from that either. And they don't want to really pay people that they think, well, we don't really need that much insight, but we just need to have someone on that team that has that skill set.
That's why it takes the people at the top, right? And it was our CEO and COO who said, we need to get someone with experience because we're starting from scratch here. And you know, they saw the value where, you know, where a lot of companies are looking at like, well, I can get someone for, you know, $80,000 versus $200,000, and you know, what's the difference?
Right.
You know.
Well, I still remember. So Janet and I started Scoot a few years ago. We noticed that when we worked with startups, they were like grown up when they hired an experienced CMO from some other industry. When the CMO got hired from like Cincinnati or whatever, we knew they were on their way, right? And I kind of wonder about that, why that isn't the case from an insights role, right? Like why that isn't that really important hire for the continuation. And I think it's very short-sighted. It's even more important with this profusion of tools, because if you are trying to save by having someone more junior and just throw a bunch of new tools at them, they're training the tools. And I feel like that is a very important job for someone with a certain amount of expertise and experience in the industry to be able to make sure that they're picking the right tools and they're training them appropriately for their organization. And I worry about skimping on that, especially now.
Yeah, but how do we as an industry, like how do we as insights professional go and communicate that back to the industry? I think that's where the problem is, right?
Yeah. Maybe we turn to our tool partners. partners and say, that's a recommendation of making sure someone
That-
internally.
That's one way, but when you look at, the Insights Career Network, every 2 weeks, and I'm probably we cross path there, but the issue is that 13,000 Insights professionals, if you go through, and I did go through because data junkie at heart, so I did go through their Excel to see super solid, strong people that you want by your side, right? But 13,000 of them are out there looking for jobs, right?
Yeah.
And the group is doing a lot to help, but I haven't seen people saying, oh, I found a job, right? I'm going to become an ally because I'm not a job seeker anymore. So that's like there is something wrong somewhere in this whole chain where, yes, Insights was valued. Yes, we want to make data decisions based on data. We rely heavily on it. And suddenly, my budgets are tight, so I'm going to get rid of Insights, right? And I'm still going to make decisions because AI is going to help me make decisions. Yes, my friend, AI will help you, but it is based on whatever data set it has. And there has to be a human eye that looks through this, that it thinks through this, that makes the decisions that it needs to make, right? And so how do we as a group of professionals communicate that back to the broader industry saying, hey guys, you can do away with this, we are valuable. The other thing we were talking about just now was, they want the Insights professional, they want them to be consumer insights, they want them to be UX, they want them to be data scientists. So by the way, you should know Python, you should have used Python for 3 years, you should know all these things. Have you done HCD? You've done this, that. And I'm like, okay, this is 4 people's job that you want to combine in one. So are you looking for a fresh graduate who has kind of done data science and done HCD as a minor or something, or psychology minor? Or do you really want somebody to work with you, build this expertise as a team and come up, right? So my question is, we as an industry, what do we do to help,
I do have to
the
say,
companies, skincare companies or whoever of the world, that you need this because this will help reduce the iterations you do. This will help you with, stopping the wrong decisions. Like Ajantha mentioned, involve research early on so that you're not coming up with a product that is not a good fit. So
just a small point on the job combination thing, because that has happened to a couple of Insights professionals that we've worked with as the teams have been combined. And so now they're in charge of user experience, data analytics, market. And there is a certain amount of, but I can't do that. And I feel like there is a little onus of figure out how to do that. Like if you are being tapped to there, so there's a teensy bit of that, but I want you guys to take the meat of that question. But I think it's interesting that like if one has the opportunity to get up and out of solely an Insights function, I think that's really important that we showcase that we can do that.
Yeah. So I think my thing was a little different.
No, I know. It's just that one thing that you mentioned.
If you're a manager, you should be able to manage a team.
Just
right?
wanted to touch on that very quickly.
Yeah. If you're a manager, you should be able to manage the teams, and you should have that kind of skill set. And which, if you have been working, for 15 years in the industry, you've worked with UX enough to know their processes, right? And to manage that team. What I'm saying is that when you look at a job description, it includes all these 3 or 4 functions as something that they require with 10 plus years of experience in each. And I'm sorry, I don't have 10 plus years of experience in Python because Python was not that big at that point. I was just required to know SQL, right? Whatever it is. But that's the concern, that there is, one, get rid of Insights. Oh, we value Insights, but we cut Insights. Secondly, we need to inform the industry that this is what you are missing out when you cut out an Insights team. And the third thing is that these functions are unique functions. You can have a common manager. They can be part of the same group, but you have to have different individuals assigned because each person is an expert. So how do we do that effectively?
Phenomenal question. As you're talking, there are so many angles kind of, I don't know if you could see the thought bubbles popping up all over like a mind map.
We will add them through there.
Yeah. The invisible thought bubbles. If you don't mind, Mike, kind of starting this conversation around the comments that both of you made. UX, I was laid off too from a big tech company, from Meta. 100,000+ of us have been. So, I'm not sitting in a corner crying about it. It's, what happened. But the one thing for us to keep in mind, big thing, as insights professionals, and I'm saying this because this happened a lot in my network, what could I have done better? Mm-hmm. We're going through a layoff season. We couldn't have done anything better. People with phenomenal reviews, all 4s out of 5s, like exceeding expectations for their level, for their role. People who got promoted 2 weeks before got laid off. It's not, not insights. It's not the engineers. It's not the designers. It's not the HR recruiters or any cohort that's been laid off. It is A, the situation, B, over enthusiasm from the top brass, from the C-suite, to hire so much when the pandemic kicked in and everything went digital, and we needed a lot of us there. And significantly less enthusiasm when investments need to be taken from whatever business as usual has been requiring and putting in towards AI. GPUs are expensive, so shifting the where operational costs are going is a big factor in it. So if any of our friends, any of our brethren is out there wondering, why me? What did I do wrong? What did I go wrong? It's not you. It's a situation. Okay, cheers. One. The second component there is, what can we do to prove the value? And even that has multiple layers. If we're able to, as an IC, show I did X and the impact of it was Y, that holds significantly more value in a resume than saying I did this or I contributed to this. Those metrics, those impact metrics may seem frivolous at times because I've had mentees ask, but I alone didn't do that. There was contribution from so many. I'm like, yes, but you also did that. So talk about it. So we need to stop being shy as professionals to say, we did this and we changed that decision. We launched this product, or we stopped the launch of that product, and we built this branding campaign. It increased brand ranking, in the heart and mind ratio. Whatever that is, let's not be shy about it and be more confident in what we've done to talk about it. And if we're research leaders, we need to be able to talk about how we've enabled our teams to thrive and function that brilliantly, to say, I revamped the organization to take research from a service function to an embedded model of a function, so that every product team, every brand that was being managed had this portion of my team over there, and that resulted in XYZ. Increase in revenue, new product launches, DAUs, MAUs, whatever our metrics are. We need to be able to talk about it fluidly. But the other thing that you're talking about, Pradeep, is hitting home really hard. I need you to do A, B, C, and don't forget D, E, F. And I need you to have maybe only 3 years of experience so that I can pay you as little as possible and get away with it, and not have the more experienced directors, VPs of research in the mix, because I don't want to pay them the $600,000 salary to pay them, whatever it is, right? Those people don't exist, and so it in one way it feels like there are solutions we can do, and we'll talk about that in a second. Another way, at least what I'm telling myself, is it's like a teenager's phase. We just need to let them go through the awkwardness of it, learn from their own mistakes, and we can't parent them through this, and we let it happen for those of us who can afford to let it happen. But I do know that there are many of us who are, say, on visas in the United States, if the US is what we're talking about, who have 90 days to find a job or you leave, who have primary financial responsibility, where we can't say, okay, you go through your teenage phase companies, I will wait around. We can't afford to do that. In that case, how are we going to hustle? And I think a component of that is coming together as a community. So are we able to publish more? Are we able to, share these Medium articles with those in our network who are still in these roles, to heads of product, heads of brand, to say, hey, this came across, thought it was interesting, thought you might find it interesting, kind of a thing. And have such conversations so that, I'm not expecting this to go viral exactly, but at the same time, at least it's getting more ears than those of us in the room. And we know that there are more of us out there feeling the same things each of us is feeling individually. Not exactly a solution, but I do feel very strongly that this is hopefully a phase that we're going through. And as an industry, it'll bear the test of time how we reinvent ourselves.
But I think that's important. So I did a little Googling research situation to be prepared for today. And there is a lot of press about problems. I read from Deloitte, McKinsey, Harvard Business Review about the issue. Mm-hmm. And the issue of insights is it doesn't move fast enough. It's not agile enough. The traditional methods don't give you what you need. It's not trend forecasting. There's lots of information about what it is not, and why companies are not investing. So I love what you just said about, could we publish more? Could we get the benefits of what we do? And maybe some case studies about what happens when you don't, right? I think that's almost more impactful than we promise we're useful and valuable. It's oh yeah, let me tell you some cases in which this would not, we were not around, because I think that there was a lot of reading about why people are making the decision against or to minimize insights, but not a lot of call to action to keep it in the mix.
That is a great point, Katrina. So shall we double click on that? Drill into that. Click away. Amel, you kicked us off by talking about, yes, we've been laid off, and that's an existing situation, a problem we need to deal with, but also how do we show impact? How do we talk about impact? And then we talked about, can we be a headlights organization? Trends reporting, not hard to do, actually, right? Mm-hmm. The power of a steeple analysis, societal, technological, economic, environmental, legal, political analysis, to talk about what's happening today and so what of it? What does this mean for us? So what of it? What should we do about it? What's our recommendation as a research organization? That is simple for us to do. What if we were to invest? Say, a team has 20 researchers and you're running that team. Can each of the 20 people take a given topic and say, I'm going to track everything that's happening in the music industry, everything that's happening in the self-care industry or tech industry, whatever it is, and start tracing things out that way. Yeah. Doing that is so powerful because then we're able to stay ahead of the curve and say, team brand, team marketing, team product, team eng, here is what you're going to be thinking about. Are people willing to go down this path that we're taking them, or are they asking for something else? It enables us to start that conversation than be in this validating mode, right? That's part one. Part two is, this is something that we've been able to do in some of the orgs and not as much in the other. Again, very culture and budget dependent, also how pushy or aggressive a research leader and insights leader can be. Setting time aside to do various things as a research organization. One of my favorite things to talk about if you talk about a research portfolio, max 50 to 60% of our time should be towards these ask and answer kind of questions. A team comes to you, CMO's org comes to a researcher, an insights person, and says, I want to know XYZ. Product comes to the researcher and says, I want to know ABC. There is a question asked, we answer the question, brilliant, job well done. 50 to 60%, we all know how to do that. What if we were to set aside 20 to 30% to be in a foresight space, thinking about what's coming next? Where do we go in the next 2 years, 3 years from now? What do we need to do today in order to present this amazing product at Dreamforce, at I/O? Like, this is what I want to launch. Let's start looking into it. Like, be foresight oriented. And what if the last 10%, I suck at math, but whatever is remaining, 100% remainder is, I mean, I call it the TGSE, don't Google it, I made it up. There's got to be something else. There's got to be something else that we are not aware of today, that we need to keep our pulse on. We don't know what it is yet. So we're just going to keep a pulse on the steeple analysis we just talked about, so that understanding the market, understanding the consumer psyche, understanding where the industry is going, where the market is going, we'll be able to start to formulate our thoughts with the more data we have, the more formulated our thoughts can be.
And be more proactive.
Yeah. So what if we were to be able to do that when we're in that environment?
Yeah. Super interesting, super exciting. I think we can talk about this during 3 hours. I see the time is flying. Thank you so much. We have one announcement for you guys from Forelight. We are announcing our free program for freelancers. So we're giving the tool for free for freelancers and for all small businesses.